I've just recently submitted my PhD thesis, and after some reflection, I've had a chance to put together some tips that I think helped me to write my PhD thesis throughout the journey of my PhD. In this video, I'll be sharing some tips that I think are useful in writing a PhD thesis based on my own experience. The first tip I have is to learn how to use Microsoft Word effectively. Microsoft Word is probably one of the most widely used word processing softwares out there, but I know that there are others that people use. So if you're using Microsoft Word, you need to learn how to use Microsoft Word effectively. You might think you already know how to use it, like just set up a document and start writing, but Microsoft Word has so many features that you don't even realize can be useful for you when you're writing your thesis. So important things like, how do you create a table of contents? How do you insert captions into your thesis? That's captions for your figures, your table. How do you cross-reference between sections? Because the thesis is a large document, so you need to constantly make reference instead of repeating yourself. So how do you reference other parts in the document? How do you navigate through your document? How do you use heading styles to help you to maintain good formatting, consistent formatting throughout your thesis? So there are so many features that if you just take some time to learn how to use Microsoft Word, it will really help you in the beginning and it will help you throughout the journey. So most universities, at least my own university, I can speak for my own university where I did my PhD, they have some training sessions. It could be sessions that are usually provided to all students, whether undergraduate, postgraduate, to help you know how to use Microsoft Word, to help you to do different kind of written assessments. So they usually have provision for PhD students too, so you can go ahead to one of those training sessions, learn how to use Microsoft Word, or just go even on YouTube or go online and search for different tips and tricks to using Microsoft Word, or do any small training. Just learn how the software works properly. So don't believe that you have all the knowledge or that something is too easy to learn. Just sit with it, and even if you feel like, oh, you've used Microsoft Word before, you'll be surprised there are so many things in Microsoft Word that you don't even know how to use. The second tip that I have is to sit with the thesis guidelines for your university. So each university has their formatting guidelines for different kinds of dissertations, whether for masters or PhD. So download the thesis guidelines, read them properly, know what formatting, what font size, what kind of fonts, how they want you to order the different parts of your thesis. Once you're able to understand that early on and you imbibe it early on, when you're working through your thesis throughout the years, it makes it easy for you because you're already sitting with the guidelines, such that at the end of your PhD, you're not rushing to adhere to the guidelines because you've already worked with the guidelines going on. And my third point, which links to the first and second point, is once you've learned how to use Microsoft Word properly and you know what the thesis guidelines are for your uni, I think it's very important to create a thesis template. So what is a thesis template? It's a template that you can create in Microsoft Word whereby you create a document that has all the formatting that is required for your thesis. So if, for example, the big headings, that's the chapter titles, a particular font size, and the way your different headings and subheadings are going to be, that's their font size, their font type, the different spacings between different sections, paragraphs, how your table of contents is, the kind of styles you're using. So there are different things you can do to set up. So you create a document, you set up a document that has all this embedded, such that as you're writing as you go along, it makes it easy for you. So you don't need to go back at the end of your PhD and start formatting your headings or formatting different parts of your thesis because you're already working within a template. The next tip is to learn how to use a reference manager. Reference managers, there's so many of them out there. I used one consistently throughout my PhD. I'm not going to mention the name because I'm not advertising the reference manager, but that reference manager, there was a lot of talk on Twitter about how it was phasing out. People were not finding it easy, but I was never faced by any of that because I know I started with that reference manager from the beginning. I was going to see it through to the end, and it really worked well for me. So, but choose a reference manager. There's so many out there. Like I said, reference managers are very good because what you can do with them is, number one, they help you manage your references. So when you start your literature review, when you're seeing papers throughout the journey of your PhD, you input them into your reference manager. You can organize your reference manager, organize the documents in different folders, organize them according to different themes, as for different chapters of your thesis. And of course, when you're citing within your document, you can embed a plugin of the reference manager into your Word document. So when you start to cite while you're writing, you can just cite in text as you go throughout the process of writing. And at the end of the document, you create a reference list. References can also be done manually, but the thing with a PhD is that you're going to end up with so many references that you save a lot of time if you learn how to use the reference manager early on use it to populate your references as you go along. But make sure that even though you're using reference manager, make sure that your reference manager is well organized. The way you impute the references, make sure that they are consistent, such that when you create your reference list, everything is good. Our reference managers are not perfect. I mentioned it in my video where I submitted my PhD. So at the end, when you create your reference list, just make sure you check everything. Don't rely on the reference manager 100%, but use it to help you organize. But at the end, make sure that you check everything is listed properly, the citations are formatted properly. But it saves you a lot of time if you use a reference manager overall, because you can spend a whole month trying to make your references look good. But if you use a reference manager, it's an automated process that you save a whole lot of time just by using a reference manager. My next tip is to write up as you go along, right from day one. One of the best things that my supervisors did for me was to prompt me to write things from the first day of my PhD. So they gave me topics to write on, and those things ended up becoming aspects of different parts of my thesis. So 3 different chapters, 3 different topics I wrote in the first 3 weeks of my PhD. Every week ended up feeding into 3 different chapters. And apart from that, just write up as you go along. Continue to write. So start writing your introduction. Well, your introduction almost likely you need to refine it at the end, but just try and get used to writing. So it's not like you're wasting a lot of time, because some people say that, oh, a lot of the writing that you do in your first year is rubbish and you're not going to use it at the end of the PhD. But I say no writing is wasted. Everything I wrote in my first year is still in my PhD thesis, which I've submitted. So I would say start to write everything as you go along. Don't leave anything to the last minute. It makes it easier, so that when you get to the end, you have everything written up. So your literature review, your methods, your methodology, as well as some things that you'll write later on at the end of the PhD. Obviously, things like your discussion, your findings chapters. But just make sure that you're writing up as you go along. It's better to have everything on the page and then edit it than have nothing on the page at the end of the PhD and then you're panicking. And of course, it also helps you to refine your work as you go along. So writing as you go along also helps you to learn how to write, because practice makes perfect. The more you write, it's more like you're exercising your writing muscles and you're learning how to be a better writer. Another tip I have is to attend writing workshops. I'm sure most universities have this for PhD students, where they have like academic writing workshops. So in my uni, we have different workshops. At least when I started my PhD, we had different workshops for different PhD years. So first year, second years, final years. And what you do in those workshops is to teach you academic writing, how to write different things like your literature review, your methodology, how to even do simple things like punctuation. It might seem like simple workshops, but just try and attend as many writing workshops as you can attend. And also, if you can attend writing retreats, I think writing retreats are amazing, because you can stay in a space with other people and get motivation to write, get a structure to write, and it's quite good. I have a writing retreat video on my channel where I joined one of the writing retreats at my university, so they're quite good. And in general, attending these writing workshops and writing retreats are also good to help you to develop strategies, like learn from other people what strategies have helped them. Just from attending those writing workshops at my uni, just listening to people talk about their struggles with writing and things that they used to help, the things that I implemented and they worked for me too. So you kind of like brainstorm and learn from other people, basically. The next tip I have, which is linked to the tip I just shared, is to not aim for perfection. Writing is never going to be perfect. Trust me, even the most accomplished writers in the world, creative writers, academic writers, they never get their writing perfect the first time. So be comfortable with writing rubbish. Be comfortable with just getting it on the page. Write almost like you're thinking. Everything that is going on in your head, you're reading a paper, you're trying to make sense of it. Write everything that is going on in your head. Even if it's your frustrations, just write everything. Then leave it to sit. Come back. And you'll find out that when you're editing, things start to get clearer. So don't ever aim for perfection. Just get started. Get up, sit down, and just start writing. And you'll find out that it starts to get easier. The next tip is to get comfortable with sharing your work. Share your work with your supervisors. Don't waste too much time being scared to share your work with your supervisors. If you follow that principle of just writing and not aiming for perfection and just getting the draft out, become comfortable with sharing that draft with your supervisors. Become comfortable with sharing with them and getting their feedback early on, so that you can start to refine your arguments and also see when you're going off tangents and when your writing is really not making sense. Obviously, you have to develop a tough skin to feedback, because your supervisors are trying to make your work better. But get comfortable with sharing your work and get comfortable with receiving feedback, because it helps you to solve problems promptly. So instead of wasting time writing a long 30-page document of a lot of stuff that don't really make sense. If you can share your work regularly before it becomes that 30-page long document, whether that's a chapter or a couple of chapters, if you get comfortable with sharing that with your supervisors earlier, over time your work starts to get better. And of course, my next tip, which is linked to that, is to please proofread your work. Always proofread your work. Before you share with your supervisors, please proofread your work. Why it's important to proofread your work, especially when you're sharing with your supervisors, even before it goes out into the world, whether that's in a paper or before you submit your thesis. Why it's important is that proofreading your work means that you've checked for grammatical errors, you've checked for where there's no logical sequence in your writing, the paragraphs are not linking up, or basically just even a basic search for typographical errors is very important, such that anybody that is reading your work, they can focus on the technical bits, the important scientific bits of your writing, because you've taken time to make sure that the writing is polished. Because a lot of people get annoyed when they share their work for feedback and then they're getting feedback on grammatical errors. But to be honest, if someone shared something with you that was full of grammatical blunders and you're trying to help them to give feedback on their work, it will be really hard for you not to give feedback on the grammatical errors, because you can't even understand what they are writing if it's not just grammatically coherent. So proofread your work first so that you can get good feedback on the actual scientific part of your work. So proofreading is very important because it also shows that you respect the time of whoever you're sharing your work with. And if English is not your first language, there are a lot of tools out there that you can use, that you can even embed into your word processor to help you to proofread your work before you then share with your supervisors. The next tip I have, which is quite useful, is when you share with your supervisors and get feedback, try to keep a log of the different drafts of your thesis, chapters, or your thesis, and the different feedback that you've received from your different supervisors. So develop a filing system, whether it's a document you create, an Excel file, a Word file, or something that's you just have everything together. Because for me, a lot of the feedback I received came in as track changes or comments within the document, or sometimes it could be an email summary, or it could be an attached document. So all of this feedback is in different places, and then different supervisors are giving feedback. So you have to find a way of organizing that together such that you're always looking at that feedback and you have it organized and you're not missing out anything. Because trust me, if they give you feedback on your work and you don't incorporate that feedback, you will still get that feedback later down the line. If you're keeping it organized and you're not missing feedback, that way you can incorporate feedback such that when you share later drafts to your supervisors, you don't need to get feedback on that kind of stuff again. Or even if you get feedback, it's just to make the work better. But it also helps you to be organized. It helps you not to panic and have everything all over the place. So try to develop a system. And also, if for example you get different types of feedback from your supervisor, so maybe like they share different files of your thesis documents, the different tools you can use, like in Microsoft Word, where you can combine revisions from different authors into one document. So that links to my first point of learning how to use Microsoft Word, because it makes you to be more efficient than you would ever have been if you didn't know how to use Microsoft Word effectively. My next tip, which may not apply to everybody, but which really worked for me, is to keep all your chapters of your thesis in one document as you go along. Most people don't do this, because I remember when I started my PhD and I was curious, how do people, put together an over 400-page document together without losing their mind? Like, how do they do it? And I realized that a lot of people write their chapters in different documents, and then at the end of the PhD bring it together. And to be honest, even though that looked like a lot of the things that people were doing, it didn't make sense to me for so many reasons. And this is personal to me, recognizing that a lot of people actually create their chapters in different documents. But what I did was, because I had my thesis template, remember I mentioned thesis template, I had my thesis template from year one. I had my thesis guidelines I'd already incorporated into my thesis template. So everything was looking good. My table of contents was populating as I go along. My title page was there, has always been there. My different list of appendices, list of figures, list of tables, different chapter headings. I had everything in one document. What it did for me was it gave me hope. It gave me hope. It allowed me to see that I was making progress. So my own personal tip, which may not work for you, but which I think could work, because some people say they get overwhelmed when they see the whole thesis, but for me, I get hope when I see the whole thesis. So I had the whole thesis in one document. And what I did was that if I was going to share a chapter, so let's say I was sharing my methodology chapter with my supervisors, what I'll just do is take that section and copy and paste into a separate document. Keep source formatting. Now, if you know how to use Microsoft Word, you know the importance of how you copy and paste to maintain the formatting. So I keep source formatting put into a new document. Once I get feedback from my supervisors, I bring it back into the main thesis document using the formatting in my thesis template. So that way, when I get feedback and the comments are there, I wasn't going back at the end of my PhD to start formatting things at the end. I did not do any formatting corrections at the end when I was submitting my thesis, because everything had always been in one document. I think it's a more efficient way, because I've seen a lot of people pulling out their hairs because when they merge the whole document together at the end, different chapters, the whole processing software just just goes crazy. And honestly, for me, I knew that I didn't want that for myself, and it just, like I said, gave me hope to see everything in one document. I think it's a more efficient way of working. That's what I think. And if you learn how to use Microsoft Word very well, there's a way you can create, I think they call it master documents. I learned it in one of the Microsoft Word sessions in my uni. You can create a master document that, if you get overwhelmed by seeing the whole document, there's a way you can do it such that it's still in the whole document, but when you want to work on each chapter, you see it as a single document, but it's still within the whole document. So if you just search around, how do you create that kind of thing, you find things like that. So if you're the kind of person that gets overwhelmed, you can still have those chapters at different chunks, but they will still be in the whole document, but you won't see it in the whole document. But like I said, for me, that was what worked for me. I think it's a more efficient way of working, because at the end, everything has been in that whole document. Any feedback you get, you just paste it back into the document, and you're working with it as you go along. And I think also it helps you because throughout the journey of writing this thesis, I moved things around a lot. Oh, there were some things that were in my theoretical framework chapter. I moved to the methods and methodology chapter in year 1, moved it back to the theoretical framework chapter, moved things from the methodology and methods chapter, moved it back to the introduction chapter. It was just a lot of moving around, such that having everything in one document allowed me to do all this moving around, and it was really quite efficient. And I wasn't repeating myself because I knew where things were in the document. So that's just my own personal tip, and I'm sure I've rambled along about it, but honestly, I think having everything in one document is more efficient. And like I said, if you know how to use Microsoft Word and you get overwhelmed by seeing everything in one document, you don't feel hope like me, there's a way you can do it such that you still have everything in one document, but you see it as different chapters. So learn how to use Microsoft Word and see if that's an efficient way of working for you. So I'm getting to the end of my tips, and I've enjoyed giving out these tips, and I'm not even sure what number I am at right now. So I think another tip I like, and which I think is very useful and very important, is to please read old theses of different PhD students. I've probably read at least okay, let me not exaggerate, maybe I read over 50 PhD theses, different PhDs. So that's why when people say, oh, nobody's going to read your PhD thesis except for your supervisors and your examiners, I feel like, nope. I read so many people's PhD thesis, people that don't even know I exist. I've downloaded the PhD thesis, and there's one very useful tool, the British Library in the UK. You can sign up for an account and go to the British Library Ethos and download thesis for everybody who has been awarded a PhD in the UK. You can download their thesis. Just go and do a search. You might not find those that recently graduated. So if you go to British Library, or even if your school library, your university library would have an archive somewhere where they keep the thesis of PhD students, so you can even ask the supervisors for their own thesis, especially if they have recently just completed their thesis, and just to see how they write. Reading different PhD theses really helped me. So all sorts of theses that use the kind of methodology I used, or the kind, different things. Just reading PhD theses, especially those from my university and those from other universities, helped me to learn how to write a thesis, see how people presented their work, see how people did things differently. So some people have a particular section looking at a certain way, some have it looking a different way, and it just helps you to just almost like validate what you're doing as you go along the way. So just read a variety of PhD theses to understand how to write academically, and just see how different people write, how to structure your thesis and different things. And one thing I enjoyed about downloading thesis, which is quite odd, or maybe it's not odd, is I like reading people's acknowledgement sections, honestly, because it's just nice to see how hard people had worked and who they were thanking, and just learn a bit more about people. So a lot of people's acknowledgements was quite interesting to read. That's the first thing I read when I downloaded thesis, just read the acknowledgements and then look at the old thesis. So it's quite nice to read old thesis basically and just see how people have structured their thesis along the years. And my final tip I'm not sure what number I am at now, but I think my final tip is to please create a plan. No procrastination. It's very easy to procrastinate because writing is tough, and in one of my tips where I said don't aim for perfection, getting that first word on the page can be really hard. But if you find that you're struggling, number one is probably speak to your supervisors, or maybe you need to take a break. Maybe you need some time away from your thesis, or maybe it's just that you need to develop a plan, you need to develop a structure. So maybe you need to just be disciplined and just tell yourself that I need to work on this methodology chapter this month. I'm going to join a writing retreat and I'm going to chunk out the chapter. A lot of times when I had writing block, or I thought I had writing block, when I just joined a writing retreat and I had 3 hours in an afternoon to write with other people online, because most of it, all the writing retreats I attended were during the COVID pandemic, and so just having that opportunity to have focused time to write the things that I wrote that I was not writing when I was just alone in my office. So it's quite nice to create a plan during the writing, but basically just you can create a plan and say, in this month I'm going to write this chapter. You find out that there's some things that you put off writing because you think, number one, linked to my other tips, you're aiming for perfection. You think the chapter is too hard to write or even refine. That if you just sit down and tell yourself that, you know what, this week I'm going to finish the revisions on this chapter, you will do it in one day. That thing happened to me. I had a very tough chapter in my thesis that my supervisors gave feedback on when I was in my second year, just at the hit, like when the pandemic hit. And yes, I went through a lot of personal stuff due to the pandemic. But I left that chapter sitting down on my laptop for like almost 2 years, and then told myself at the end of 2022 that I need to finish the revisions. My supervisors had already given me feedback on it, but I thought it was so difficult. And I told myself it would probably take me a month. But I just sat down and I completed the revisions on that chapter in one day. In one day, like, I realized that what I thought was tough was not tough. So just create a plan. Don't procrastinate. I realized that if you just create a plan, there are a lot of things you will just complete. Things that you think would take you 1 year will take you 1 month. Things that will take you 1 day will take you 1 hour. So just create a plan. But if all else fails, you've created a plan, you've tried to just write, be disciplined, just take a break. So I guess that's my final tip. I thought that was my final tip. So my final tip is to please rest. Writing can be tough. Sometimes you've sat down, you've done all the writing, you've created all that content, and you've edited. The writing is not just making sense, or the words might not start to make sense, or you're sleeping, you're dreaming of your thesis, you're seeing the words jumping around. I think it's about time you took a break. So yeah, breaks help. And also speaking with your supervisors. Most of the time when I had issues writing something, if I just asked one of my supervisors or 3 of them, can I have a one-on-one catch up with you, or can I have a meeting before our next monthly meeting, and we just talk through what was troubling me about the writing, I usually went back and the writing became better, or I had more clarity. So speak to your supervisors, go on breaks, and just believe that you can do it. I think that's another tip, is to believe that you can do it. It's just to believe that you can do it, because a PhD thesis can be quite overwhelming. PhD is overwhelming, and then writing up all the research that you've done is overwhelming. But just have that belief that you can do it. You started somewhere, and you're going to end up with a PhD thesis at the end. So yeah, those are all my tips. I don't know how many they are now, but I hope that you find these tips useful, and I hope that you get some clarity on your PhD writing journey, or whatever writing that you're doing. And I look forward to seeing you in my next video. If you like this video, you can give it a thumbs up, you can subscribe to my channel, and you can turn on all post notifications so you get notified when I upload the next video. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.